Well, as some of you may know, I'm often asked to give presentations outside of the company. And this last weekend, I gave a presentation to the Dairy Deli Bakery Conference of Southern California in Santa Barbara. And Neil was there, and I don't see Tricia, but a number of our people were there, and of course, a number of our customers. And so Warren and Elio and several others said, well, you know, you're going to the trouble to put this presentation together, why not share it with our people? And I said, why not? Sure, I'd be glad. And so here we are. The presentation was called, or the theme of the conference was Cultivating Leadership. And so many of the speakers, some of them were presidents or senior vice presidents of retail chains, were talking about how they grew their business and how they helped build some of their human resources in a general sense, and some were actually promoting certain training programs that they were marketing. I was asked to talk about leadership as an individual. How does an individual work on their own personal leadership? How do they develop their leadership? And so that's what I focused on. And that in itself is a fairly complex subject. But I've sort of kept it down to some very basic fundamentals that I think has some real take-home value and that virtually everyone can utilize. So I think all of you know I went to Harvard Business School. I didn't learn leadership at Harvard Business School or any other formal education arena. I learned leadership in the Marine Corps, where it is not taught by some favorite professor in a 3-hour credit course. It's taught by every officer and every NCO, non-commissioned officer, in every unit, in every hour, every day, in every deed, in every circumstance, so that one becomes immersed in a culture of leadership excellence that is extremely powerful and built on a foundation of solid core values and virtue. And it's practiced in virtually every heartbeat of their lives. So it is a training experience on leadership that, in my mind, is very extraordinary. And in my case, I can say it had a profound impact on my core values, on my personal traits, on my character, and undoubtedly on my leadership capabilities. So, to be clear, we're talking about leadership today, not management. There's a vast difference between those two. Management is a science, a body of knowledge and techniques that focuses on the efficient utilization of your resources, manpower, materials, time, money. So the efficient utilization of resources to accomplish a job, to accomplish an assignment. And it's a subject that is well taught in all business schools. It lends itself to a business school environment, and they do a pretty good job with it. Leadership is quite different, and it's not so well suited to pure classroom instruction. Because leadership is a skill in dealing with people. It is, and here's a definition for you, leadership is the use of personality, personal traits, personal attributes, and character to influence, inspire, and direct people and organizations in a way that gains their willing confidence, respect, trust, cooperation, and support to accomplish a mission and to perform at the highest possible level. So it is quite different from management. And to be an effective leader, therefore, if you buy this definition, one needs to work on developing the kind of personal traits and attributes and character that causes other people to be willing to follow you or want to follow you. So today I'm going to talk about the traits that are deeply ingrained in Marine officers, and I think they have universal application irrespective of what kind of organization you're in, whether you're Boris or wherever you might be, and what kind of position you might hold. And I think they have some very useful take-home values. And I want to point out that leadership is not something that is limited or focused solely on the chief executive officer of the company or those that hold other formal leadership positions within an organization. Leadership is something that everyone in an organization can contribute to, so it's relevant to everyone in this organization that's sitting here. And I think you all know that in almost any group of people, there's an informal leader shows up. That informal leader has strong leadership traits. Maybe not a formal leadership role, but strong leadership traits. And their very existence tells us that virtually everyone can have some impact on shaping attitudes, inspiring people, and influencing performance, irrespective of where they appear on the organization chart. And great organizations tend to have leadership in depth, leadership that runs throughout an organization. And I like to show this little slide right here of geese flying in formation. There is a lead goose, a formal lead goose, an alpha goose, I guess you would call him. But he's not at the head of that formation very much. It's too tiring to be up there. So he flies and then he drops back into the formation and another goose takes his place. And so ultimately all the geese in this formation will share some of that leadership responsibility, will fly at the front. And scientists have shown that geese flying in this formation can fly about 70% further than if they were flying by themselves. So what it's showing is that if everyone's sharing a little bit, contributing to the leadership of an organization, that organization can perform at a much higher level. So I'm going to now talk about 10 critical leadership steps or leadership traits and attributes that most leaders have. Now, obviously it's not universal, but most leaders would have this. And the first is they provide vision and core values to the organization. They see an organization not just as it is today, but how it can become. And they put forth a vision for the future that is exciting, challenging, inspiring, but attainable. And I think some of you who may have been around, well, I guess there's not many of you who have been around in the 1980s with Bar S, the mid-1980s. We were a much different organization. We had no real big presence in the meat industry. We were a small, relatively small regional company. But we put forth a vision to become the premier company in the processed meat industry serving the value segment of the marketplace. That was the vision. That was the true north. And a form of that is recited daily. And back then, people could say, are they out of their mind? Are they crazy? But today, no one would say that vision is not achievable. We either have achieved it or we're very close to achieving it. So leaders put forth a vision for the organization. They also shape and protect the culture of an organization. Those few key values that are consistent, persistent, dominant, and show up in every word and deed that organization executes, hopefully. The core values that provide meaning, folklore, and tradition for an organization are critical. And it's incumbent upon leaders throughout the whole organization to support those core values and to enforce them, protect them. And you know, in our daily recitations, affirmations, if you will, we list almost all of the real core values of this company. The second thing they do is leaders display competency and professionalism. They're technically proficient in their job. I mean, I don't think anyone wants to take directions from someone who is incompetent or inexperienced or immature, who doesn't have the necessary background to do the job. People look to leaders who have been in the trenches, who have a proven record of performance, who have demonstrated their capabilities and their expertise and who conduct themselves as professionals. The third is that leaders always treat people with dignity and respect. And they go out of their way to trust their people, to extend trust to their people, which is a great show of respect for their people. They, on the other hand, must earn the trust of their people. And they have to earn that trust by constantly doing the right thing every time, so that people understand and believe and trust that their leaders have their heads on straight and will conduct themselves in a manner that they're doing the right thing for the right reason every time. And leaders praise their people in public. But if they have to reprimand someone, and that happens on occasion, that's always done in private. And if those circumstances happen, they address the unwanted behavior, the unacceptable behavior, whatever it might be, in very specific terms. So there's no doubt about what the issue is and where the problem is. And they do it in a manner that they don't demean the individual in any way or demean the individual's self-worth. And when it's over, it's over. Leaders stand for honor, truthfulness, fairness, and integrity. No individual or organization can achieve greatness without those attributes. And they're prerequisite for anyone in a leadership position, because who would willingly follow someone who did possess those characteristics? And leaders need to ensure that their people in their organization abide by that same code of conduct, which means there can be no favoritism, that credit is given where credit is due, that rewards and privileges are distributed as equitably as possible, and that they administer their people and systems and procedures with as much justice as they can muster. And it also means that organization integrity, that there's no cheating on quality or any other standards, and the commitments are kept no matter what, no matter the pain or cost. We live by our word. And leaders possess self-confidence and optimism. They have sufficient personal security and personal self-worth that they can control their egos and not suffering from the I problem. They don't hog credit when things are going well, rather they stress the contributions of others. And leaders can take bad news calmly without losing control of themselves or their emotions. And they accept responsibility for the failures of their team. And they don't try to blame others. And leaders always hold forth positiveness, optimism, and confidence to their team, and they give people hope no matter how bleak the circumstances. Number 6, leaders almost always are strong and decisive. It's very frustrating to follow someone who's weak, timid, afraid, won't make a decision. Leaders, on the other hand, tend to take charge. They're bold, they're assertive, they seek responsibility. They almost invariably are action-oriented with an innate bias for getting things done. And leaders communicate effectively. They know they're communicating all the time by word, deed, and deportment. And they try to make sure that those communications are clear, consistent, and positive. And usually a leader has some skill in speaking or writing so that they can use those communication tools to stir emotions, to get people excited, to motivate people, and to inspire people to and their team to excel. And leaders emphasize teamwork. They know that a team is always more effective than a group of individuals. And so they work hard at building team spirit, enthusiasm, loyalty, and pride in the unit, so that people want to join that team and be part of that team. And they know that the signs of a good team is the morale will be high, discipline will be evident, esprit de corps will be strong. And here's a pretty important one. They put the interest of others before their own. And I'll talk a little more about that. Of course, leaders can be firm in demanding performance. And they can be very tough when core values are violated. But underneath it all, they have to have genuine care and concern and respect for their people. They have to stand up for them. They have to go to bat for them. They have to coach and mentor them and give them every opportunity to excel. And leaders serve those who serve them. They give of themselves unselfishly for the good of their people and for the organization. In the Marine Corps, we have a saying that officers eat last, as a way, and it's a way to visually demonstrate putting the interest of others before yourself. Obviously, with their rank, they can move, and you understand that there's chow lines in mess halls in the military and out in the field. Often there's a chow line when they bring the field kitchens out. Well, officers obviously and senior NCOs could obviously force their way to go to the head of the line. I mean, they're the senior people there. They don't. They all go to the back of the line. Officers eat last, so that if there is a shortage of food, they're the ones. Their people are fed. They're the ones that don't get the food. And that's only symbolic of the whole attitude of officers eat last. Let me give you another example that may drive it home a little clearer. A good friend of mine named Lieutenant Caloa Stokes was a platoon commander in the Marine Regimental Combat Team that led the assault out of Kuwait in 2003 and the invasion of Iraq. And they kicked off in that maneuver, in that fight, before all the logistics had caught up with them. So his platoon, which is about 42 people, they had armored vests, meaning they had the material, but they didn't have any armor plates. There's a Kevlar plate that goes in the front and a Kevlar plate that goes in the back. So they needed, to be fully equipped, they needed 84 Kevlar plates. They didn't have any. And so they headed off toward Baghdad. They were about a week into this fight when a supply unit caught up with them and delivered much needed ammunition, water, food, medical supplies, and gave them 32 Kevlar plates. But how do you think those Kevlar plates were distributed? You think the officers and senior NCOs hogged them for their own personal protection? Absolutely the opposite. Officers eat last. And so those plates were distributed first to the lowest ranks, the privates, and then the second lowest ranks to the private first class, and then to the next lowest ranks, the lance corporals. And when they got to the corporals, which was the next lowest rank, they could see they were going to run out of plates, and so they gave them to the most junior corporals, so that the senior NCOs and Lieutenant Stokes had no plate. So they put the interest, the safety of their men before their own. And the final point is that leaders lead from the front, they lead by example. They recognize that they are role model for an organization, that they must walk the talk, and that their actions carry far more weight than their words. Actions speak louder than words, and so they lead by example. And good leaders never ask their people to do something they're not willing to do themselves, and they demonstrate that frequently by taking visible lead of a very difficult assignment. They lead by example. And I want to elaborate on this point because it is particularly important. It's a hallmark of I think, leadership. Certainly it's a hallmark of Marine Corps leadership. And I think that I'm going to tell you two stories. I think these two stories will illustrate to you that visible leadership, leading from the front, leading by example, can have a powerful influence, a very powerful influence on how an organization performs. So the first story is about Carl Melantis, who is a noted author and a decorated Marine. And in two of his books, one is called Matterhorn, the other is What It's Like to Go to War, he references specific leadership advice given by a popular redheaded major who taught tactics at the basic school in Quantico, Virginia. The basic school is a very rough and demanding course of training. When I went through, it was 9 months that all Marine officers must go through before they're sent out to lead real Marines. And this major was talking to a class of young lieutenants who were close to graduation, who had been extensively trained to be platoon commanders. That's what the basic school does. And they were anxious to get out to line units and assume those duties. And so the major said to them, in essence, when you get your platoon, it will undoubtedly be staffed with a number of highly qualified and experienced non-commissioned officers who are perfectly capable of handling most of the normal day-to-day duties or leadership duties of the platoon. So in a sense, you're going to be a bit redundant. But he went on to say that a time will come when you lieutenants are going to earn every penny of your pay. And when those critical moments happen, damn well we'll know. Well, several months later, Lieutenant Milanes and his new platoon were deployed to Vietnam. And one day they are climbing a hill on a mission to seek out and destroy NVA positions, North Vietnamese Army positions, when suddenly they come under intense and withering automatic weapon fire. And the platoon is pinned down, everyone hugging the dirt and probably praying. And Lieutenant Milanes quickly surmised that he had to get his men up and moving on the attack, or they were going to sustain heavy casualties, maybe get wiped out. Well, it was also clear to him that this was one of those critical moments that the major had been referring to. So he turned to Marines on his right and his left and he said, "Lay down covering fire." And then he stood up. He stood up in the face of flying metal and started advancing up that hill, running in a zigzagging manner, and personally led an assault that took out 4 enemy bunkers in succession, according to his Navy Cross citation. And history shows that Marines will follow this type of visible leadership. They will stand up under fire, they will move on to the attack, and they will seize the objective. And Lieutenant Milanes points out, he was only alone for a couple of moments. When he glanced back, his Marines were right there with him. That's visible leadership. That's leading from the front. That's leading by example. Well, from time to time, leaders in virtually any organization or company or department will face such critical moments, usually related to some crisis or extraordinary challenge, or even a unique opportunity. And of course, in the civilian world, these critical moments don't involve the dangers or physical demands of combat. But they are nonetheless critical moments pertaining to mission achievement, financial risk, maybe the very survival of the enterprise. And as such, they demand conspicuous leadership, because the attitude, action, deportment, conduct, bearing, decisions of a highly visible individual can have enormous influence on how the organization performs in overcoming adversity or moving forward and seizing a new objective. Well, in my fairly lengthy professional career, most of you know that I've been CEO of this company for about 31 years now. I've had to face quite a number of these critical moments. And so this next story is personal, and people usually like to hear personal experience that's relevant to the subject. And I think some of you, certainly here, maybe a few others, were here for this particular story. In April 2003, the United States Department of Agriculture found a pathogen, Listeria monocytogenes, on several product samples in our Clinton, Oklahoma production facility. And while there was no sickness in the public, no evidence of the pathogen in the marketplace, we had no way to prove with absolute certainty that contaminated product hadn't been shipped out of that facility. So, in the interest of what I think you might call extreme consumer food safety, the USDA requested that we initiate a nationwide recall of all products produced out of that Clinton facility that still had shelf life remaining. And we agreed to do that. And that was announced late one afternoon in April to the public and to our employees. Well, this type of recall is a very public black eye, very damaging to a brand. It's incredibly disruptive to a company and very, very expensive. In our case, about $40 million. It's really a food executive's worst nightmare. And if you'll recall, Jim, this was a shocking and stunning development for our organization that prided itself on being the premier company in the processed meat industry, one that delivered the highest quality products to our customers. Well, I'm sure you can recognize that this kind of devastating news can be very demoralizing on a company and on its people. And I knew that we could not allow negativity or defeatism to fester within our ranks. That we had to shift attitudes and raise spirits and do it damn fast. So I called for an all-hands meeting in the corporate office for first thing the next morning. And when everyone was seated, I marched into the room wearing my Marine Corps dress blue uniform. Well, of course, our employees had not ever seen me in uniform before. Maybe a few had in some circumstance. I suspect many of them had never seen a Marine officer up close and personal. And so my appearance shocked them, stunned them, if you will, and there were audible gasps in the audience. And I told them that we were about to engage in the fight of our lives, and that this was a cloth I wear going into battle because we are going to fight like Marines. And I think from my tone, they damn well knew I was serious. And then I told them a Chesty Puller story. Chesty Puller is a famous, highly decorated Marine. This particular story took place during the Korean War, when the 1st Marine Regiment, which he commanded, was fighting its way south from the Chosun Reservoir down near Coterie. And a reporter came up to Colonel Puller and said, "Sir, your regiment is vastly outnumbered by numerous Chinese divisions. Aren't you afraid?" Chesty looked at the reporter and said, "Son, I'm in the midst of the finest warriors in the world, United States Marines. Why would I be afraid?" And the reporter went on and said, "But sir, your men are totally surrounded." Chesty smiled and said, "You're right. That means we can fire at will in any direction and hit the enemy. The bastards won't get away this time." So by now I had their full attention. And I told them that we were not going to hang our heads and be defensive about this temporary setback. On the contrary, we were going out in the marketplace with our heads held high and implement the most aggressive and professional product recall in food industry history. And then we're going to bounce back with record performance. I pointed out that anyone can look good when things are going according to plan, but that it takes an extraordinary team effort to overcome great adversity like this recall. So that this was really a unique opportunity for us to demonstrate the greatness of our organization. Well, our people love a challenge, and they got fired up and fully committed to take on this very difficult assignment in a very positive, aggressive, professional manner. And I could talk for hours about the details of the recall, and we don't really have time for that, but let me just say, and I think you can ask anyone who was here, that we faced this very difficult challenge and test most successfully In fact, I think many of us feel it was the finest hour in this company's history. And we did rebound the next year with a quantum leap in profitability. Well, this particular story clearly reflects the training that was deeply ingrained in me as a young man by the Marine Corps, for which I am very grateful. And I think it has had a great deal, a very direct bearing actually, with how RS has performed and dealt with some very difficult situations like that recall over the years. And I hope that, I recognize that both of those stories are maybe more dramatic than the kind of situations that most of us are likely to encounter, but I think that they provide a kind of illustration of what's the power of visible leadership, leading from the front, leading by example. What kind of influence can that have on a team, on an organization, and carrying out its mission? And I think it could have an enormous impact. Well, heroes throughout the ages have fascinated people, and in today's organizations, true leaders in today's organizations are today's heroes, really. They provide vision and values for their people. They stand for honor, truthfulness, fairness, integrity. They put the interests of others before their own. They protect their people. They call forth the talents and gifts of their people. They root for them. They make them feel important. And they inspire the team to excel. The traits that I have discussed today can be learned and practiced throughout the organization at every level. And so I ask you to take a moment today and think about that and ask yourself, is there anything that I can do to strengthen any of my personal traits, any of my personal attributes? Is there any way I can make my leadership more effective? I think you know the answer to those questions already, but I would suggest if you sit down and spend a little time and personally assess that, then you're in the best position to assess your leadership potential and assess what areas might be improved. And then build yourself an action plan on how you are going to work on developing the kind of personal traits, personal attributes, character that will enhance your leadership capabilities. And I think if you work at it, your leadership skills will grow, and in time, you can help guide our company toward its vision in the future. And if we are really successful in cultivating leadership throughout the organization, leadership in depth, well then the potential of our company is truly unlimited.